Both parties ready?
Yes, Your Honor, state's ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor, defenses as well.
Address beforehand.
Don't believe so.
Nothing to state.
All right, state whenever you're ready.
State will call Daniel Lopez. There's two detectives in the courtroom, Your Honor. I have asked them to step out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sir, would you raise your right hand? Yes, sir. You swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, sir. Go ahead and have a seat, state your name and spell for the record.
Good afternoon, my name is Daniel Lopez, D-A-N-I-E-L-L-O-P-E-Z.
May I proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lopez, I want to take you back to October 29th, 2023 in Ybor City. Do you recall that evening?
Yes.
Who were you there with that evening?
That evening I was with my wife and one of her sorority sisters.
Were you all going to bars, clubs?
Yes, that was the reason we were there. Ybor is known for having big parties on like Christmas and Halloween and stuff like that.
Was that a holiday weekend?
Yes, it was the Halloween weekend.
All right. Now, let's talk about the early morning hours of October 29th, 2023. Do you all leave a specific club?
The early hours of October 2023, we left. I'm not sure the club's name. It was across the street from Gaspar Grotto. That's the club that we exited.
What street were you on?
We were on 7th Avenue.
Did you have your cell phone out?
Yes.
Did your wife have her cell phone out?
Yes.
Were you all taking cell phone videos?
Yes.
Around what time are you leaving the club and walking down 7th Avenue?
So we left the club around 2:35, walking down 7th Avenue, all of us with our phones in hands, walking down the street, kind of just commenting on other people's costumes and taking in the nightlife. We were heading for a pizza and then heading home.
Okay. What time would this have been that you're walking down the street when you get your cell phones out?
I would say it was around 2:42. It was good.
Okay. What time do the bars and clubs close, if you know?
To my knowledge, maybe around 2:30, 2:35. I know last call's at 2 a.m., so everyone kind of stays a little longer and drinks a little more, finishes their drinks, and then the lights come on about half an hour later.
Fair to say that 7th Avenue is pretty packed.
It was extremely packed.
All right. Have you been down on 7th Avenue on nights other than October 29th, 2023?
Yes.
On that night, that Halloween weekend event, was 7th Avenue more packed with people than on the other nights you have been there?
Yes.
As you're walking down 7th Avenue, does something catch your attention?
Initially, we were walking down 7th Avenue, taking videos just of our costumes. As we were recording the video of our friend, we noticed that right behind her, an altercation was beginning, an argument between two groups. We could see by their body language that they were both extremely agitated, and so
Okay.
everyone kind of was giving some space.
Let me stop you there. Do you have your phone out at this point?
Yes.
Are you recording?
Yes.
Do you end up recording this interaction, this altercation?
Yes.
Like, give me some perspective between the buildings, the sidewalk, and the street. Where is this altercation taking place?
As we're heading down 7th Avenue, we're heading down the direct middle of the street. Everyone is in the roads because we're all in costumes and going to the bars. Right in the middle of the street, that's where the two groups end up being in the altercation with each other. It was near the Ritz Club and the New York Pizza that was on in Ybor City. Well, they were both on the left and the right of where we were.
Could you make out any statements being said by either group?
No.
Based on body language and verbal language, are you able to tell that there's some sort of disagreement, altercation? All right. Does your wife have her cell phone out?
Yes.
Is she also recording videos?
Yes.
Have you had a chance to review both the video that you recorded as well as the video that your wife recorded?
Yes.
Did you also have an opportunity to review 2 other videos of that altercation?
Yes.
Now, those 2 other videos that you reviewed, did you record those videos?
No, I did not.
Do you recognize the content of those videos?
Yes, I do.
Showing defense what's been pre-marked as State's Exhibits 1 through 4 individually for any objections.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right.
Mr. Lopez, have you had an opportunity to watch each of these videos? What's been pre-marked as State's Exhibit 1, State's Exhibit 2, State's Exhibit 3, and State's Exhibit 4?
Yes.
And do those videos accurately reflect what you saw that night of October 29th, 2023 on 7th Avenue in Ybor City?
Yes, they do.
Your Honor, at this time I'd ask permission to publish what's been pre-marked as State's Exhibits 1 through 4.
No objection?
No objection.
Without objection, they'll be admitted to states 1 through 4.
There's a screen behind you and to the left. I'm going to get the video loaded and then I will switch it over to the video itself instead of the white screen. Okay, Mr. Lopez, before I start playing State's Exhibit 1, did you take this video itself?
No.
Do you recognize the contents of State's Exhibit 1?
Yes.
When we're talking about the road, the sidewalk, and the altercation, and if you need to stand up in order to see it, where in this video do you see this altercation occurring? And we're going to play the video in a second, so go ahead and stand up if you need to. You can walk over there if you want.
Coach, go ahead.
Show me what we're going to be looking at here.
We're going to be looking at the two groups. It's hard to tell with the lighting on which
Yep.
side they're on.
That's fine.
But before the video begins, it's going to be two groups arguing with one another. You can tell by their body language. There's a lot of hand motions.
Let me stop you right there. Point on the screen where we're supposed to be looking. Is it towards the bottom, towards the middle?
It's going to be murdering.
Okay, you can go ahead and have a seat. And Your Honor, let me pause it for a second. The sound's on my computer. I think it may be off on this. Yeah, I paused it, so it should. Okay, let me see. It's on my computer. All right, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 2. All right, Mr. Lopez, before this video plays, do you recognize obviously the contents, but also the camera angle of this video?
Yes.
Would this be one of the videos that either you or your wife took based on that camera angle?
Yes.
Now, when you're looking at this video, State's Exhibit 2, are you in the middle of 7th Avenue?
Yes.
Approximately, and you can ballpark it, how many people are around you at this point?
Just in this exact location?
Not in this exact location, but when we're talking about 7th Avenue, how many people are you going to say were within the near vicinity of you?
Say 1,000 people.
Okay? Is that the video that your wife took, State's Exhibit 2?
Yes.
Your video, is it longer than that video?
Yes, it is.
Are you able to tell the difference between the two based on the length of the video? Approximately how far away are you when these videos are being taken?
I'd say about the distance between you and I right now.
Okay? Estimate how many feet you think
Maybe
that might
about
be.
10 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 3. Now, this is State's Exhibit 3. Did you take this video?
Yes, I did.
The individual that we see at the very beginning of this video standing in front of you, is she with you?
Yes.
Now, earlier when you were referring to you were videotaping a friend of yours, is that who we're looking at here?
Yes, that's.
Now, I'm going to pause that video. Fair to say the balance of this video is you getting away from this area.
Yes.
Now, the final video, State's Exhibit 4. Have you had an opportunity to review that one, please?
Yes.
Do you have a second gunshot wound that you were able to observe on Mr. Wilson's body?
Yes,
And where was that gunshot wound?
it's along the right leg, and it passes in a directly upward trajectory. So on the outside of the right calf and moving upwards towards the thigh. So it would be moving, if you were standing in the anatomic position, it would be moving from your foot to your head. So it would make it inconceivable for that to be the first gunshot wound that struck the decedent, because it would have to come essentially from the floor upwards. It would have to come out of the ground.
Would that gunshot wound be more consistent with being a second gunshot wound?
That's correct.
Would that gunshot wound be more consistent with someone who is now in a prone or lying down position?
Correct.
Are those the two gunshot wounds you observed to Mr. Wilson's body?
That's correct.
With the, and I'm going to go back to the first gunshot wound for a second. With that immediate incapacitation, is Mr. Wilson in any way capable of moving his arms or his hands?
No,
When that cervical spine is struck, does he lose all bodily function at that instant?
yes,
And it, as you said, is death imminent or immediate right after that?
yes.
I'll pass the witness.
Ross?
No questions.
This witness be excused.
He's excused.
Not here for you, thank you. Okay, next witness.
State calls Detective Joshua Kennedy.
Raise your right hand. You swear affirm the testimony about you is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, yes.
Thank you, sir. Take a seat. If you could state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Detective Joshua Kennedy, spelled Joshua, last name Kennedy, Kennedy.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, if you would, please tell me what you do for a living and how long you've been doing that job.
I am a law enforcement officer of the city of Tampa. I am currently assigned as a homicide detective. I've been in that role just over a year.
And were you the person who was ultimately assigned to an investigation related to a shooting in Ybor City on the early morning hours of October 29th, resulting in the death of a person by the last name of Wilson?
I was, yes.
Were you assigned as the lead detective?
That's correct, yes.
In this particular case, that means you are not the scene detective, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you still have a chance to walk the scene, as it were?
I did, yes.
As you were walking the scene, did you see the positioning of the body of the deceased?
I did, yes.
Were you aware of the fact that the deceased was later discovered to have a holstered firearm at his waistband.
Yes.
As part of this investigation, were you all able to determine a caliber of that particular handgun?
Yes.
Has any NIBIN testing or other testing been done that has suggested that that gun was at any point ever discharged?
Not in this incident.
Based on the positioning of the gun, did it appear that the gun had not been drawn from the waistband?
It appeared that it had not been drawn.
In the vicinity of the body, did you see a black baseball cap?
Yes,
And is that a baseball cap that we'll talk about in a second when we get to your interview of the defendant?
I believe so, yes.
All right, so let's talk about your interview of the defendant. Somewhere around 5 o'clock in the morning, did you have a chance to finally conduct an interview with the defendant?
I did, yes.
And there are a series of interviews, so I'm just going to talk about the first one to begin with. This interview that starts just after 5 a.m., was the defendant in handcuffs in the back of a patrol car at that point?
He was, yes.
Did you tell the defendant that he was not free to leave?
Yes.
Having told him that he was effectively detained at the very least, did you then proceed to provide him Miranda warnings?
I did, yes.
And how did you provide him Miranda warnings?
Via our, the Tampa Police Department number 310 form. It's a written form.
And do you read the form to him? Do you hand it to him and let him read it? What do you do?
I read it too.
When you read it to him, did he appear coherent?
Yes.
Did he appear lucid?
He's being good fine.
Anything about him suggest he wasn't paying attention or not understanding what was going on?
No.
Having read him the Miranda warnings from the Form 310, did the defendant express any sort of confusion or uncertainty or doubt about whether or not he understood what you had read to him in terms of his Miranda rights?
No.
Having read the Miranda rights to him, did he ultimately consent verbally?
Yes.
Since you had a printed form, did you also then ask him to sign the form itself?
Yes, I did.
And did he do so?
Yes.
And is that part of the evidence that has been collected in this case?
It is, yes.
Now, we talked about whether or not he was coherent, but we're talking about Ybor City. So did you ask the defendant if he had been doing any drinking that evening in Ybor City?
Yes, he was at.
And did he deny ever drinking?
He did.
Did you ask him about any sort of other narcotics or prescription medicines the defendant might have used?
Yes.
Did he indicate that he had used marijuana, but it had been roughly 10 hours earlier?
Yes, that's what he indicated.
Did anything about him appear that he was not understanding what was going on, he was confused, anything that would cause any sort of doubt as to ability to waive his right to remain silent?
No.
So, having agreed to speak with you, did you start asking the defendant about what happened earlier in the evening, just before the 3 o'clock hour on the morning of October 29th?
Yes.
Did the defendant identify to you where he was standing at the time the incident took place?
Yes.
And can you tell us how he did that and where he described he was?
He pointed towards the area on 7th Avenue that he said that he was standing. He said that he was familiar with where the 7-Eleven is on 7th Avenue, and he said that he was walking. If you were to walk down 7th Avenue, he was located just before you got to the 7-Eleven. So just east of the 7-Eleven is what he described.
Is that 7-Eleven basically across from that courtyard area that we refer to as Central Ybor?
Yes.
So he's not quite all the way to Central Ybor.
Correct.
Now, in asking him to describe or point to the position, did you physically take him out of the car and ask him to point to a place on the ground?
We ultimately did that, yes.
And the place where he ultimately pointed, is that in the same vicinity of where the body of the deceased was located?
Yes.
And is that in the same area where that black baseball cap was located?
Yes.
So he tells you that he's basically standing on 7th Avenue, not quite all the way to 16th where the 7-Eleven is. And do you ask him to explain to you how the events all started that night?
Yes.
As part of that, does he reference some sort of ex-schoolmate?
Yes.
Tell us what he says about that.
He said that he was on 7th Avenue when he saw a girl that he recognized as someone that he went to middle school with. He indicated that he waved to her.
And did he provide you a name of this person?
No.
Did he provide you a partial name, like a first name or a last name or a nickname or anything?
No.
Just out of curiosity, since the case has begun and has proceeded now for about a month, has any person come forward and said, I'm that girl, I was the one in the street, I saw the defendant there, we went to school together?
No.
So he says he sees this girl and he waves to her. Now, before we get to that, I want to ask you, do you ask the defendant what he's wearing?
Yes, he was asked that.
And does he describe what clothing he was wearing at the time of the shooting?
Yes.
And does he mention a black baseball cap?
Yes.
Does he ever reference that baseball cap falling off?
Yes.
Is that consistent with the black baseball cap found near the body of the deceased?
It is, yes.
Does he describe any other sort of clothing he's wearing, shirt, pants, anything on his arms or legs or head or anything like that?
Yes.
What does he describe?
He described, I believe it was a black shirt that he was wearing, and I believe he was wearing dark colored pants.
Does he have anything on his head?
He described the hat that he was wearing.
Does he have anything else on his head?
He was wearing a ski mask. That's
Okay.
what he described.
Some sort of mask on his head.
Yes.
So he has now identified what he looks like. He's described this girl. Does he mention that there's any other people in the vicinity of this girl as he's waving to this girl?
With the girl?
Not with them, just in the vicinity of the girl. Does he describe there being other people around her that become of interest?
Yes.
What does he describe to you?
He describes a group of, I believe he said approximately 6 people, 6 males approached him at that point in an aggressive manner.
Did he indicate at any point that those males were part of the group or with the female that he had waved at?
He said he did not believe they were.
All right, so now there's this half dozen guys. He's waved at the girl, and what does he tell you the half dozen guys do in response? How do they act? How do they behave?
They come up to him in a threatening and aggressive manner.
And does he describe to you exactly what it is that he says they're doing that is threatening or aggressive?
Yes, he said one of them put his fist up in the air as though he was going to throw a punch. He indicated another male spitting.
Okay. Are those two separate people? One who puts his arms up as if to fight, and another one who spits?
Yes.
So he describes these men coming towards them. One looks like he wants to fight, another one spits at him. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
As part of the interview, does he provide you any information about other people that were with him at the time that all of this is transpiring?
Yes.
Were you aware of another individual who was hit by a bullet but not killed as part of this investigation who was later identified as a friend of the defendant?
I am aware of him, yes.
And who is that?
His name was Bradley Garcia.
All right. And so does the defendant tell you that he was with Bradley that night?
Yes.
And who else does he say is with him?
He was with Bradley's girlfriend. He said her name was, I believe, Sally.
Sally. And does he describe anybody else besides Bradley and Sally?
I believe he also indicated that some of Sally's friends were there.
Did you understand those to be men or women?
I believe them to be female.
Okay. Does he describe any other guys with him other than Bradley then?
I believe that's all he described.
So he says that him and Bradley are there, there's these other girls, and now these guys are coming towards them. Does he say that he pulls out a gun and fires a gun?
He does say that, yes.
And where does he say he has the gun on him?
He said that he had it in his front waistband.
And does he describe the make and model of the gun?
Yes.
What does he tell you the gun is?
He described it to be a Glock 10mm firearm.
All right, so he's pulled out a Glock 10mm, and this is the weapon that he's discharged. Has he indicated that this is his firearm
Yes.
that he had on him?
Yes.
Now, when he says he pulls this gun and fires this gun, does he tell you that he saw somebody pulling a gun out?
No.
Does he tell you that he saw somebody with a gun in hand?
No.
Does he tell you that he saw anybody doing anything that would suggest they were armed or going to arm themselves?
No.
At any point in the interview, does he eventually reference somebody grabbing at their waistband?
Yes, he does.
Now, we've already discussed two guys in this group of 6 men. There's the one who spit and the one who put his hands up. In this interview, the person that the defendant is now identifying as grabbing at their waistband, is it one of those 2 men?
No.
So there's some other third person,
Yes.
separate and apart from the guy who's spitting and the guy who's putting his hands up. Does so he tells you that he sees some guy grabbing at his waistband, but is he very clear? Do you ask him directly if that guy ever pulled a gun out?
Yes.
And what does he say?
He said that he did not see a firearm.
Did he ever say, I saw him at least start to pull it and he just didn't get it all the way out, anything like that?
No.
And are you very clear in asking him if the guy who supposedly is grabbing at his waistband is different than the guy who spits at him?
Yes, I am. I was.
Did he tell you that he was trying to fire in the air and misfire?
No.
Did he tell you that he was trying to shoot at the ground and misfire?
No.
Did he specifically tell you that he pulled the gun and pointed it at somebody and pulled the trigger?
He said that he was pointing it towards the group.
The group specifically.
Yes.
He describes it as just firing at the group.
Yes.
Now, at the time that you're conducting this interview at 5 o'clock in the morning, do you have any videos yet?
At that point, I did not.
So when we get to videos that are turned in by people who were at the scene, particularly a husband and wife couple who provided videos, you don't have any of this at your disposal yet, is that correct?
Correct. During our first interview, we did not have any video of that.
Did you ask the defendant specifically a question about what is it that you were in fear of that made you decide to pull a gun and fire?
Yes, he was asked that.
And in response to the defendant say, I don't know, there was multiple things?
That's correct.
Did you ask him what those multiple things were?
Yes.
And did he reference the guy grabbing at his waist?
He did reference that.
And did he reference the guy who put up his hands as if he wanted to fight?
Yes.
Did he mention the guy spitting at him?
I believe he did.
So I just want to make sure His Honor understands from this interview, what is the timeline of events? We know that there's a guy spitting, we know there's a guy putting his hands up, and we know that there's a guy supposedly grabbing at his waist. Does he describe to you which of those acts happened first?
I don't recall that.
Do you remember if he told you the guy spitting at him spit at him first, and that the shooting came after that?
The shooting did happen after that, yes.
After the spitting?
Yes.
Did it happen after the guy had put his hands up? That one as if he wanted to fight?
The shooting took place after.
After, okay. Did he indicate that he knew any of these people in front of them?
No, he said he did not.
Did he indicate that he had any sort of prior bad blood with any of them?
No.
Did he say like, oh, he looks like the guy I had a fight with once upon a time, or he looks like the guy that I owe money to, or anything like that?
No.
Could he specifically tell you anything about what these 6 or so men were saying at the time?
No, he said it was too loud.
So he doesn't have any recollection of any words being said?
Correct.
So he never tells you, they said they were going to kill me?
No.
They never said something like, I got something for you as they reached for their waistband?
No.
They didn't say anything like, I'm going to shoot you?
No.
Do you specifically ask, and I want to be real clear because this is the first interview, we haven't gotten any video. In the first interview, do you ever ask him if he saw someone specifically reach for a gun and try to pull a gun out?
Yes.
And does he tell you no, he didn't see anyone try to reach for a gun?
The only thing he said was that he saw reaching towards waist.
Okay, but I want to be clear. I could do this, and that's not necessarily the same thing as, and I'm just sort of touching my waistband. What I'm asking is, does he ever describe to you, I saw the guy go under his shirt, into his pants, or anything like that, where he says he sees him pulling a gun?
No.
All right, so that's the first interview. Sometime later, did you receive the first of multiple videos that were ultimately discovered in this case?
Yes.
And was that a video, I'm going to show you what is State's Exhibit 3. Let me change the camera over here a second. This video is 54 seconds. Is this the first video you received?
It is, yes.
Okay, because there's another video that is like 15 seconds. Sorry. Got away from me. So now you received this video. This is the first video that you had. Now, was I out there that night?
You were, yes.
And as part of the investigation, were we having a discussion about what, if anything, there would be in terms of crime here?
Yes.
Prior to this video, had there been a discussion about potentially letting the defendant go because based on his statement alone, it sounded like he might be claiming self-defense?
Correct.
Once the video came, did that analysis change?
Yes.
So now you have this video. Do you go and re-interview the defendant?
I do, yes.
Do you give him new Miranda, or at least tell him, hey, you don't have to talk to me, but I'd like to talk to you?
Correct. I remind him of.
And do you get some sort of response from him indicating that, yes, he's still willing to talk to you?
I did, yes.
And so at this point, are you showing him the video, or are you just showing him like a still shot of the video?
Initially, I showed him just a still shot.
All right, and so in the video that we have right now, State's Exhibit number 3, which is at about the 1 second mark, I want to draw your attention to a person who's on the right side of the screen, who appears to have black and red shoes, light colored pants, a dark colored shirt, and something black on their head. In the second interview, does the defendant specifically identify himself as the person that I just described?
He did, yes.
That's the second interview. Somewhere around 7:20 in the morning, now 2 hours after you've conducted the first interview, do you decide to go back and show the defendant the actual video instead of a still shot?
I do, yes.
And is the defendant still in custody at that point?
He is, yes.
Do you all tell him again that he has the right to an attorney, he doesn't have to talk to you all, if he doesn't want to say anything, he can just shut his mouth?
Correct.
And does he agree to speak with you anyways?
Yes.
At that point, does there come a point in that interview where you physically hand a laptop to the defendant and allow him to watch this video and stop it and pause it to like identify specific people in the video?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to play the video, and you can stand up if you would, because I think that would be the most helpful. I want to start asking you about people that get identified in this video in the third interview. And I'm going to go to right about the 3-second mark. Okay, now at the 3-second mark, thereabouts, there is a gentleman in the dead center of the camera angle who is wearing what I would call a red jacket or a hoodie. Did you ask the defendant who this particular person was?
I did, yes.
And for the record, is this the person who was ultimately discovered dead in the middle of the street from the defendant's gunshots?
It is, yes.
Does the defendant identify this person as either the guy who spits, the guy who throws his hands up as if he wants to fight, or the guy who was reaching for the gun?
He indicated that he was the one that spit.
So the guy in the dead middle of the video there with the arms up and extended, that's the guy who spit.
That's correct.
Now that you're showing him the video in this third interview, does the defendant ever say, I saw that guy in that red jacket, I saw him reaching for a gun?
No, he did not.
Does he ever describe that when he puts his hands up, his midriff is exposed and he can see a gun in his waistband?
No, he did not.
Does he ever describe this person in this red jacket ever threatening to pull a gun or mentioning shooting him or anything that would suggest that the person in the red jacket is armed with a firearm?
No.
Now, beyond that, I want to try and talk to you about some other people. The defendant is still in all black and white with the black and red shoes, correct?
Yes.
Just next to him, there is a gentleman with sort of poofy hair and a white shirt and black pants. Is that Bradley?
That is.
So that is the defendant's friend.
Correct.
It looks as if Bradley and the guy in the red jacket are interacting with each other, but there's a variety of other people around there. I want to first draw your attention to the left of the guy in the red jacket, there is a tall, thin individual in all black with white shoes. Does the defendant ever mention that person as a person of interest during the interview?
Yes.
And what does he tell you about that person?
He indicated that that could possibly be one of the males he saw reaching towards their waistband.
So he's now specifically telling you the people that he thinks are reaching for his waistband.
Yes.
Does he say it's definitively the guy in all black with the white shoes, or does he suggest it could be somebody else?
He suggested it could be someone else.
All right, well, let's see if we can find that person on the video real quick. There is another person who's coming to view. We're now at the 5-second mark. Again, we can see the guy in the red jacket with the arms up. Does the defendant ever acknowledge if that's the guy in the red jacket flicking him off?
I believe that's what he said he was doing.
All right. Just behind him, it's a little hard to see, but there's a guy, again in all black, but you can see his shoes are sort of green colored, not white. You can actually see the white shoes of the other guy behind the defendant as well. Is that another person the defendant says was of interest?
Yes.
And what does he say that person is of interest for?
He said that could have also been the gentleman that he saw pull or go towards his waistband.
All right. Did the defendant ultimately tell you whoever it was that was going for the waistband was in all black and he just couldn't be sure if they had white or green shoes?
Yes.
But it was clear it's not the guy in the red.
Correct.
I want to draw your attention. I'm going to go over and point to him because he might be hard to see. This guy. He's got this sort of white shirt, this sort of greenish pants, and he's wearing a brown jacket. When it moves, you can see a little better. Did he talk to you about that guy?
He did, yes.
Who did he say that guy was?
That was the subject that he said put his fists up in like a fighting stance.
All right, so in this third interview, you now have a clear indication as to who the guy is spitting, who the guy is putting his hands up, and you're down to one of two potential people who might be the one who was reaching for the waistband. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In the video, at the spot where we're stopped right now, at the far right of the camera, you can see that next to the defendant, there is a guy in all white with a black looks like a hat turned backwards, and sort of cream or khaki colored pants. Did you ultimately discover who that was?
I did, yes.
Who's that?
His name is Zachary Cherry.
Is he a friend of the defendant's?
Yes.
And did the defendant ever mention Zachary Cherry in the many interviews you did with him? There is another person. Let me see if I can find him. I'm going to back the video up a second. Right here, I don't know if you can see the mouse. Yeah, you can. Here's Bradley with the shirt with the white letters, the white shirt with the letters on it, correct?
Yes.
And then here's another guy in a white shirt, black jeans, white shoes, just like Bradley, except he appears to have like dreads. He doesn't have the same poofy hair. Did you ever figure out who that is?
Yes.
Is that Christian Cruz Cordova?
Yes.
Did the defendant ever tell you my buddy Christian was there too?
Yes.
Not in all the interviews?
I don't believe so.
All right, detective, thank you. You can have a seat again. Now, I want to play the whole video. Did you let the defendant watch the whole video, at least as far as up to where the shooting occurs? Now, in that video, does the defendant ever say during the third interview, when you've literally handed him the laptop in the video, he ever said, oh no, this video is missing something important. There's a whole chunk here where the guy reached for a gun or grabbed a bat or they started to knock me on the ground and beat me senseless. Did he suggest that the video in any way was missing any important detail?
No.
As part of this interview, do you take the time again to specifically ask the defendant if the guy in the red jacket, aka the deceased, ever reached for his waistband, ever tried to pull a gun, ever actually pulled a gun, or did anything else that would suggest he was armed prior to being shot?
Yes, correct.
And did the defendant ever indicate the guy in red he thought was armed in any way?
No.
I got one more, Your Honor. Yes. Detective, I think we covered it earlier, but I want to go back because now we have a video and we can watch it. Did the defendant tell you that he was just sort of firing indiscriminately into the group of people?
No.
I mean, originally, is that what he told you, that he was just sort of firing at the group, he wasn't picking any particular person?
Into that group, correct.
He never said, no, I specifically was shooting at the guy in red.
Correct, he did not say that.
Now, there were a variety of casings that were recovered at the scene that were not the 10 millimeter that we believe are associated with the defendant's gun that he ultimately surrendered, correct?
Correct.
There's some 9 millimeters, there's some 40 calibers.
That's correct.
There are other camera angles that relate to a separate investigation that is still ongoing, correct?
Yes.
And in that investigation and those camera angles, do you see other people discharging guns?
You do, yes.
All the people that you see discharging guns, does that occur after the defendant has shot that guy in the red jacket and killed him?
Yes.
Anybody firing any guns, or pointing any guns, or flashing any guns as far as your investigation has pointed out thus far, prior to the defendant pulling the gun and pulling the trigger?
No.
Pass the witness, John.
Cross.
Thank you.
1 second, sorry.
Sure.
No, I can do it there.
Leave it in there.
I actually put it on the desktop, so it's just right there. Just
Okay. Good afternoon, Detective.
Afternoon.
All right. I want to go way back to the beginning for a little bit, okay? Now, ultimately, Ty Phillips is arrested for the homicide. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in a part of your investigation, and when you're talking to him, everything that you discuss with him is recorded, correct?
Yes.
So there's actually a full recording of his entire statement all 3 times you speak to him, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, you were able to discover that Ty's 5'8", 130 pounds, correct?
That's what he indicated, yes.
Okay, actually, I think he said 120 pounds, but I looked at your report and it indicates 130 pounds. Okay. Now, you're also aware that although Mr. Wilson was 14 years old at the time, he was actually 5'11", 150 pounds, correct?
Sure, yes.
And when you look at the video, the other black males that are with Mr. Wilson, surrounding Mr. Wilson, approaching Mr. Phillips, they're all the same size or bigger than Mr. Wilson is himself, correct?
Correct, yes.
All right, and to this date, we don't know exactly who those individuals are that were there on scene?
As part of the ongoing investigation, some have been tentatively identified.
Okay, but none have been arrested yet, correct?
I've made one arrest in this case.
All right. And none of these people came forward that night to say, I was involved in a shooting, or I saw a shooting, or my friend was shot tonight. I want to talk to you about what happened, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But one person did come back to the scene that evening and surrendered themselves to law enforcement, right?
Yes.
That was my client, right? Tyrell Phillips. Walked back in, crossed the yellow tape, and then went to an officer and said, I was involved in the shooting, all right, and I have a firearm, correct?
That's correct, yes.
He also said that he fired in self-defense. That's what he told the very first officer.
That's my understanding. That's what he initially
Okay.
said.
And so he, at that point, is placed in handcuffs and put in a squad car, waiting for detectives like you to arrive, correct?
Yes.
All right. And it's also your understanding, in reviewing the reports that your officers have done in this case, that while he was at the squad car with the other officer, that officer allowed him to use his cell phone to call his dad, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he listened in on the call when he spoke to his dad and actually to his girlfriend as well, correct?
Yes.
All right. And in that conversation, he told him that he was involved in a shooting, but it was in self-defense, correct?
That's what he told on the phone, yes.
I think his words were, and these were in quotes in the report, I was scared, right?
Yes.
It was self-defense,
Yes.
and I had to use my gun.
Yes.
Okay. Now, there were 3 10mm casings that are found on scene, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And from the videos that you've obtained, not only this one, but others since then, that seems perfectly consistent with the 3 shots that you can hear and see are fired by Mr. Phillips, correct?
Yes.
All right. There are no other 10mm casings, correct?
Yeah.
And when the gun's taken from him, when he walks back in and surrenders and says, I was involved in the shooting, when his gun's taken, there's still bullets that are in the gun, correct?
Correct.
There's actually 11.
I don't know the exact number, but I do know that there was additional rounds that were not fired.
Okay, I'm just going by the reports of the officers who took that. It says 11 rounds were still in the firearm.
That sounds consistent.
Okay, and that's a Glock 29 and 10mm semi-automatic.
Yes.
All right. And you were also able to discover, based upon tracing that firearm was legally obtained by Mr. Phillips, correct?
Yes.
In fact, on that report, it shows that Mr. Phillips had gone and obtained his concealed weapons permit, correct?
Correct.
All right, and at that time, he had the concealed weapons permit, he legally purchased that gun, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
All right. Now, you also were able to trace the firearm from Mr. Wilson, correct?
I personally didn't do the trace. We have other detectives that did.
Right, but
yes.
in that report, it indicates that the Ruger .40 caliber that Mr. Wilson had that night was actually a stolen gun, correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right. So it had been stolen from someone who had purchased it, and we don't know the circumstances, but it ended up in Mr. Wilson's hands.
Correct.
Okay. Now, after he turns himself in back to the scene, at some point you all approach him and ask if you can talk to him, correct?
Yes.
Now, he doesn't ask for a lawyer. Okay. He, I think at one point he actually asked if he can use his vape for a minute, correct?
Yes.
Which was nicotine, so he could basically have a smoke.
Sure.
All right, and you guys allowed him to do that.
Yes.
All right. And then he begins to speak to you to tell you what occurred, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Now, he walks back into the scene at 2:47 a.m. That's according to Officer Velasquez's report, okay? Which is just minutes after all this finally subsides, correct?
Yes.
Because when we look at these videos, and the state hadn't played them all the way through yet for His Honor, but after Mr. Phillips discharges the 3 shots that he fired, almost instantaneously, right after, you hear multiple gunshots go on, correct? Right. And you can't really tell direction, although we know, based upon the people that are injured later, one who was actually killed, that it's all in the direction of where Mr. Phillips and his friends ran away, correct?
It's all towards their direction, yes.
Yeah. So we've got a video with anywhere from 4 to 6 males that you can clearly see at the moment just prior to this occurring are moving towards Mr. Phillips, correct?
Correct.
And the people that he's with, correct?
Yes.
And they look angry.
Yes.
Okay. Like they're upset about something, we don't know what it is, there's all this noise, you can't hear what any of these people are saying because there's so much chatter in the video, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Right. And I think the state mentioned something about flipping him off, but what Mr. Wilson and at least 2 of the other men did was they flashed 4 fingers, correct?
I'm not sure what they were flashing. Their hands are up.
Okay, well, you can see, you've looked at all the videos, right?
I have, yes.
All right, and so you can clearly see that he's putting up 4 fingers on each hand.
Okay, yes.
All right, that's basically he's telling these people that he's in a gang, correct?
I'm not familiar with that specific gesture for a gang. It's a possibility. I can't say with certainty if that's the case or not.
Okay, you haven't experienced that situation at all in your work as a detective in the homicide unit as to what those signs mean?
No, I do know that that's a common gesture. Different gangs have different hand gestures that they do.
Mhm.
I'm not familiar with the specific gestures that were being shown at this incident.
Okay. And as a part of this investigation, you've been looking at Mr. Wilson's, his social media?
It's come up. It's not been a focus of my investigation.
Okay. But there's, and a lot of it's public, correct? So
Yeah.
it's open for anyone to look at. And you can tell from looking at that social media that he, in several instances, is involved with firearms, correct?
Yes.
Has money that he's flashing out, like on the floor, like I don't know, just finished a transaction of some sort?
Sure.
Okay. And there's other individuals that look very familiar to the people that are in the video with him in some of his Snapchats and Instagrams as well, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And that's,
Sorry, can I just clarify, when he says his, is he referring to the defendant's social media or the victim's social media?
no, Mr. Wilson, the decedent's social media, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. In Mr. Phillips' case, there is some social media, but there is none that relate to any of the individuals that are involved in this case, correct?
It's, like I said, that's not been a focus of my investigation at this point. I've seen some of the social media. That's still ongoing.
Okay, all right. But to this point so far, we know that the people that are surrounding Mr. Wilson, that are approaching Mr. Phillips and his friends that evening, they're involved, and you can see them actually interact with him in his social media, correct? With Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
All right. Now, there were several shell casings that were eventually obtained from the scene, correct?
Yes.
The .640 caliber, 14.9 millimeter, correct?
That sounds correct.
All right. Now, you had Officer Austin Hill, part of what his job in this case was is to go back through some of these videos to try to determine, what shooters were involved in this case, correct?
Yes.
All right. And I think on direct, you indicated that you knew that there's more than one shooter, that Mr. Phillips was not the only one who discharged the firearm that night, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. In fact, we know of at least 3 people from the video, correct, other than Mr. Phillips himself, that had to discharge a firearm that night, correct?
Yes.
And yes, the video indicates that Mr. Phillips fired first, but it's almost, it's within a second that you hear gunshot go off right after the 3 shots, correct?
I would say it's a little bit longer than a second.
2 seconds?
Maybe a little bit longer than that.
Pow, pow, pow. Pow, 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 pow.
1 to 2 seconds.
Okay, all right. And those are the shots that injure these other individuals, correct?
Yes.
All right. In fact, we know from what's been discovered so far from the ME and ballistics that the other individual that passed away that night, that was killed, it was a 9mm slug that killed him, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. All right. And all the other individuals are running in the same direction that Mr. Phillips and his party are running, correct?
So, by looking at video, the crowd actually splits almost in half. There's some that run to the east and some run to the west.
Right. And so these three men that are firing shots are firing them indiscriminately at the crowd.
Yes.
All right. In fact, they actually hit Bradley, who's running right next to Mr. Phillips, correct?
Yes.
All right. And he falls to the ground. Mr. Phillips then, along with many other people, run as far away till the shots stop, and then he walks back into the scene to tell you, I'm the one that shot, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, there's no evidence that you've obtained so far that you would suggest that Mr. Phillips fired anything more than those 3 shots in succession, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So there's no suggestion that he injured any of these other individuals because 2 of the bullets end up in Mr. Wilson, correct?
Correct.
And the third, we don't know, but it was in the opposite direction of everyone else that was hurt.
That's my
Correct?
understanding, yes.
Okay. Now, you're referencing about his interview a little bit, and the state seemed to be suggesting to you that he didn't, and I would agree with this, that at no time in the interview does he say, I actually saw a firearm, that someone pulled one out of his waist and pointed at me or anything like that, correct?
Correct.
But what he did tell you, and he says it repeatedly, is that one of the individuals, one of the ones in black, he had his hand towards his waistband, and he believed that he was going to reach for a gun, correct?
That's what he indicated, yes.
Yeah, well, he said, these guys are coming at us, we're backing up, and you can see that in the video, right? Do you ever, at no time do you see Mr. Phillips move towards those people. He continuously moves backwards away from them, correct?
Yes.
All right. And at some point, Mr. Wilson, who's in the red, gets probably, this close to him?
Yes.
All right. And the other individuals are right here, all surrounding him, correct?
Yes.
All right. And it's just at that moment that he says he sees one of the guys, what he believes to have a gun, by his waistband, and he's in fear, not only from that, but from the one spitting on him and continuing to approach him, another one raising fists like he was going to hit somebody or hurt somebody, and then what he believes to be a man with a gun, correct?
He never actually said that he saw a gun, he just said that he was reaching for it.
I agree with you. He didn't say, I saw a gun.
I just wanted to be clear.
All right. What he said to you was, I believed that it was a gun that he was reaching for, correct?
Correct.
All right. And he said that's the reason he fired at the group, correct?
Yes.
In fact, he even says, I wasn't trying to kill anybody. I just wanted them to back off, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the video that you shown was one of the first videos that came out, and in that video, you cannot see Mr. Wilson the entire time in the video, correct? Within those few seconds?
Correct.
Because it's like as they're approaching, for whatever reason, that person taking the video, Mr. Wilson moves out of the camera frame, correct?
Yes.
But you reviewed the video of Daniel Lopez.
Detective Hill's supplement, that video, he initially observed that and believed it to be muzzle flash. We've since looked at another video and we've determined that flash to actually be a lady holding a phone, or what appears to be that. But then a few seconds after that, you see muzzle flash coming from that individual in the blue hooded sweater.
Okay, so he does
It's
also,
just a little bit.
right, but there's muzzle fire coming from him.
Correct.
All right, as well as 2 other individuals
Yes,
that you're still working to identify and arrest.
that's correct.
Okay. Now back to the second video of Mr. Lopez. you didn't have that one to show to my client, correct?
Correct.
All right. But when you get to watch that other one, not only do you see the group continue to move towards him, but you also see Mr. Wilson continue to move towards Mr. Phillips, correct?
Yes.
And at one point, he has his hands up, and then he puts them down, and then he raises them back up and continues to move at him again, correct?
Yes.
And you can see he takes his right hand and he puts it behind his back, and then you see him sliding it towards his waistband.
Yes, you do see that.
And it's at that instant that Mr. Phillips pulls his gun and shoots him, correct?
Yes, so when we reviewed that video, it appeared that him moving his hand towards, and I'm talking about the decedent, Mr. Wilson, when you see him move his hand towards the center of his waistband, it appears that it's in response to Mr. Phillips retrieving his firearm.
Okay,
When you
so,
break it down frame by frame.
so from the Wild Wild West, then it's like whoever was able to draw first.
I guess you could say that.
Okay. And is there any requirement that you're aware of under stand your ground or self-defense that says you have to wait to be shot before you shoot?
No.
Okay. I don't have any further questions of this witness.
Agree with that?
Detective, Mr. Perry asked you very explicitly about a moment on the video where the decedent may have had his hands behind his back and then kind of slid it back around towards the front and may have been going to his waistband. Again, does that man over there, the defendant, ever say, "I saw the dead guy go for a gun"? You were also specifically asked about the fact that the defendant said he was just firing at the crowd, correctly?
Yes.
I want to play the video. Actually, I'm going to play the video.
Which video?
I gotta change it over so we can all see it.
And I'm sorry, but which video are
This is State's Exhibit 3 for the
Okay.
record.
Correct.
The 15-second video. Detective, I don't have a whole heck of a lot of experience with a gun, but I'm pretty sure that when I pull a gun and I point it at a specific person, it's going to shoot one specific person. The bullet's not going to bend wildly to the right 90 degrees, is it?
That's correct.
It's not going to somehow, like in the movies, go around the person I'm shooting directly at and hits a guy behind him, right?
No.
I mean, I guess it could go through him.
Sure.
That's a possibility. But as a general rule, bullets fly in a straight line at the thing the muzzle is pointed directly at.
Yes.
Detective, we've talked about a first, a second, a third interview. There was a fourth interview, which is basically when the defendant is being arrested. You talk to him during that time, correct?
Yes.
And is it fair to say the defendant completely thinks he's acting in self-defense?
Yes.
But we've watched the video. Obviously, the decision of the Tampa Police Department was something different. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
There's also a fifth interview, correct?
There was, yes.
Just pass the witness, Your Honor.
Just very briefly, Your Honor. Now, as you've already indicated, Mr. Phillips surrendered himself at 2:47 a.m., is that correct?
I don't know the specific time. It may have been a little past then.
Okay. But your first interaction with him at the squad car is at 5:08, right?
Yes.
So we're like 2.5 hours with him sitting in handcuffs in a squad car, and he's handcuffed behind his back at that point, correct?
Yeah.
All right. And then the second, there's other interviews that carry on to after 7 o'clock. So we're 5 hours in a squad car, correct?
Correct.
And this is right after he had discharged his firearm, right?
Yes.
And he knows that he's at least injured somebody. You hadn't told him yet that Mr. Phillips was dead, but he knew that someone was seriously hurt, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, and at one point even asked, am I going to jail tonight? And you said, we're still waiting to make a decision, right?
Correct.
Okay. But despite all that, he willingly talked to you and tried to answer all questions and was as cooperative as somebody could have been, correct?
Sure, absolutely.
And when you told him that Mr. Wilson had passed away, you could clearly see how upset he was by that, correct?
Yes.
He was, really got choked up and upset.
Yes.
All right. And after that, you told him that he was under arrest for murder in the second degree.
Yes.
And I think his words were, what was I supposed to do? What else could I have done?
That statement said you can, yes.
Okay, I don't have any other questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
You have your reporting on the firearm you took from Mr. Phillips?
I do not have that report.
Do you want to say it well?
I really didn't see the firearm too well. There was other detectives that did that.
Well, here's my questions, at least at some point. You said it's Glock 29.
Yes.
Now, you said there was 11 rounds in the magazine?
I believe that's what
The standard magazine for that gun is going to be 10 rounds, if I remember correctly.
Your Honor, I apologize for intruding. I actually had asked the detective to try to get those answers, but we got to him too fast. I think he had another detective looking to see what the round count and the maximum capacity size of the magazine was. So if you would, Your Honor, what I would suggest is we let the detective step off the witness stand.
Right, I have one other question for him, if he's going to get off the stand and ask. When you made the gun safe, you clear the magazine, you clear the chamber, was there still a round in the chamber, or was there no round in the chamber? That's something I'd like to know. Okay?
Yes, Your Honor, and what I would suggest is that he be not released fully, but released from being a witness on the witness stand so he can step outside. I want to ask him what the answer is.
I'm just curious, was it a standard 10-round magazine? Did it have that 3 or 4 round extensivity, always Glock? Then was there slapping on those things, and was there a round in the pipe at the time when it was made safe?
You're talking about Mr. Phillips.
Phillips fire.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious about that.
Mr. Phillips's or Mr. Wilson?
Excuse me, Mr. Phillips gun.
Mr. Phillips is the defendant.
Right,
Yes.
right.
I don't know about his gun. I know it was made safe.
Right, okay. Just
So was there a
double check.
round in the chamber? And what was the capacity of the magazine? And how many rounds were in the magazine?
I only say because I know Your Honor had earlier been asking about Mr. Wilson.
I'm sure it was, but this is a different
Okay.
round of one.
Your Honor, if we could take a short recess?
Absolutely. It's according to the hell, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
When you were last on the witness stand during cross-examination, you were asked a whole lot of questions about Elijah Wilson and Elijah Wilson throwing up fingers and gang activity, potentially flashing money and guns in rap videos, correct?
Yes,
There's actually a fifth interview, isn't there?
there is, yes.
And the fifth interview came about because I was providing you information on things I knew from my position as the gang investigator at State Attorney's Office.
That's correct, yes.
And in that, I asked you to go ask the defendant if he was a member of a gang.
Yes.
Now, to be clear, before I ever called you and asked you to go ask him if he was a member of any sort of gang or any sort of group, because gang has a legal connotation as far as the statute. So any sort of group, did the defendant ever get asked in the third interview if he was part of any sort of like group of people or neighborhood or anything like that?
Yes.
Did the defendant tell you he was from town and country?
Yes.
And did the defendant tell you that he was part of a music group or a rap group called the Tampa Youngins?
Yes.
Did you specifically ask him if he was, and again, not to use the official term as it's defined in the statute, but just generally, did you ask him if he was part of a gang?
Yes.
And did he vehemently tell you, absolutely, I am not part of a gang?
Yes. Yes.
That's in the third interview, right?
That's correct.
So you were updating me as the investigation was unfolding, were you not?
Yes.
And that's what prompts the fifth interview, correct?
Yes.
Did I make you aware of social media postings by the defendant?
Yes.
And have I continued to make you aware of social media postings by the defendant?
Yes.
Specifically, did you ultimately discover, because the defendant told you from his own mouth, that he goes by the rap name TBY Rel, or Tampa Bay Youngin Rel?
Yes.
And did he tell you that the Tampa Bay Youngins had other members?
I don't recall that.
Well, he told you it was a group,
He
right?
told me it was a group, yes.
He didn't specifically name all the members.
Correct.
But did you end up discovering that, for example, Bradley Toro Garcia, the other gentleman who was injured, is part of that same group?
Yes.
Did you discover that Christian Cruz Cordova, who was another one of the guys that was at the scene, who the defendant never identified when he was interviewed by you 5 times, is also part of that group?
Correct.
Did you also discover that there's a 4th person by the name of Zachary Cherry, who is some sort of music video producer?
Yes.
And when I say discover these things, is that because you actually talked to Bradley Toro Garcia and he told you that that's what he does?
Correct.
And did Christian Cruz Cordova, again, indicate that he is friends with the defendant and they're in a rap group together?
Yes.
And did Zach Cherry tell you that he produces rap videos?
Yes.
So I want to draw your attention to 2 discs that I'm going to label as State's Exhibit number 6 and number 8. as well as 2 sets of photos, one of which I'm going to label as State's Exhibit number 7, which is a single photo, and one of which is a composite of photos, A and B, which are 2 photos that I'm going to label as State's Exhibit number 9. It's right there in the thing. I'll get to 9 in 1 second. So I want to start with 6 and 7. Did you become aware of a video called K4K, written or produced by a person by the name of Tyrell Phillips?
Yes,
Is that publicly posted on YouTube?
it is, yes.
And did you ultimately discover that Tyrell Phillips is Christian Cruz Cordova?
Yes,
And did you see the defendant in that same video?
yes.
Now, was I telling you to go ask if the defendant is part of K4K
Yes,
in that 5th interview?
yes.
And did he flat out deny that he knows anything about K4K and he's not affiliated with K4K?
Yeah, he stated that he was not a part of the group.
Okay. And so I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 6, this disc. Is this the video of K4K, the publicly posted rap video that the defendant is depicted in that is on YouTube?
Yes,
And here is a screenshot, which is contained in State's Exhibit number 7. Specifically, is this a screenshot of the defendant throwing up 4 fingers at the 1 minute and 14 mark of K4K, the video which is posted according to YouTube on April 13th of 2022?
yes,
That's 18 months before the shooting, right?
yes.
Do those fairly and accurately depict the screenshot and the actual video of the K4K video?
Yes.
Now, beyond that, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 8. Did you discover that there was yet another video posted by Tyrell Phillips where the defendant is prominent in the video?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you some screenshots, which is State's Exhibit number 9, A and B. Are these screenshots of the defendant in the video that's titled War with Everyone, which is dated September 19th of 2023, about 6 weeks before the shooting?
Yes.
And do these photos fairly and accurately depict screenshots from that particular rap music video?
Yes.
As part of that, here's State's Exhibit number 8. Is that the disc for War with Everyone posted to YouTube where the defendant is present flashing a specific and distinct black Glock 9mm or Glock handgun with red alterations onto it?
Yes.
Judge, you saw those photos? Just want to ask you, Detective, this is the gun that's recovered from the defendant, right?
Yes.
This is a black Glock with parts of it that appear to have been altered so that they are bright red.
Yes.
Do 8 and 9 fairly and accurately depict the War with Everyone video that was posted to YouTube that the defendant is part of?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask for permission to publish the videos and the photos.
Any objection?
No objection.
No objection. I will allow you to publish all the videos and photographs.
So first, I'm going to show State's Exhibit number 7. Is this the defendant here at the 1 minute and 14 mark with his right hand up and 4 fingers extended, wearing the Good Intentions hooded sweatshirt in the K4K rap video?
It is, yes.
Now again, did you specifically ask him, are you part of K4K?
Yes.
And did he say, I don't know anything about K4K?
He said that he was not affiliated with them.
All right, so give me 1 second. I'm going to fire up the video then. All right, should be ready. For the record, I'm going to play State's Exhibit number 7. And let me check the sound. Hey, that guy right there at the 15-second mark, standing in the dead middle with the dreads, who is ultimately the singer in the song, is that Christian Cruz Cordova?
It is, yes.
That's the guy who was actually at the scene with the defendant that night in Ybor, right?
That's correct.
Detective, I want to stop that a second. I want to go back. As part of the information that I was providing to you, did I indicate to you that I thought that there might be some involvement in all of this, that K4K had something to do with the death of a person by the name of Kamari Kerr?
Yes.
So I'm going to stop the video here at 0048, where it says, "Long live Kamari, 3305 to 10220. That appears to be somebody who has died and is again throwing up, I guess, 3 fingers in that instance, correct?
Yes.
Did you all ask the defendant, hey, are you part of any group that has to do with some kid who died or something like that in a town and country area?
I believe that was that, yes.
And did he flat out deny that he knew anything about it?
I believe he denied it.
I want to go back a second there. I just want to make sure you tell me. Right there at 1 minute and 9 seconds, isn't that Christian Cruz Cordova and the defendant in the good intention sweatshirt?
Does appear so, yes.
Is that the defendant flashing like a gun? Are you serious? All right, so that was State's Exhibit 6. Let's go to 8. This is the one that's posted 6 weeks before the shooting, right? Is this the one that's posted about 6 weeks before the shooting?
Yes, that's correct.
State's Exhibit A, you can clearly see the title of the video, War with Everyone, but at the bottom you can see it's posted from Tyrell Band Up, War with Everyone, September 19th, 2023. And Detective, my eyes are not so great, so maybe you can read that for me. At the very bottom there, can you read those first couple hashtags that are part of the video?
Sure, it says hashtag TVY, hashtag K4K.
K4K, okay, thank you. And here's B of that same video. There's a gentleman on the left in a hood and a mask. We can't see his face, but the guy right next to him pointing the gun at the camera, who's that? And right next to him, who's that?
That's Christian Cordova.
And since you saw him in person, the guy next to Christian Cordova, the other guy with the gun in hand, with the thin mustache and the poofy hair, who's that?
That's Bradley Garcia.
That's the guy that got shot in Ybor on the night of the shooting with the defendant?
Yes.
All right, so let's watch the video. And I put it in. The opening logo there seems to say Zach, Z-A-C, right?
Yes.
You don't know if that's Zachary Cherry, but you understand that Zachary Cherry was some sort of filmmaker, correct?
That's correct.
But ain't got the way your legs spin the beat so many times, ain't no one out there getting sick. Tell me what happened to it. Her look creep really a bitch that's getting burned with that blink. I ain't coming back from this. Straight up Gucci to this booty. What the fuck is in these cities?
Detective, right at 22 seconds, there's a specific line. What the fuck is NHC? As part of your investigation on the ongoing shooting, is NHC believed to be the other group of people that were in Ybor that night?
It is, yes.
So 6 weeks before this shooting, this video is saying, what the fuck is NHC? Is that correct?
Yes.
We shoot a movie, we gon' name it Halloween. We falling out, they hit a target. So they gon' get on feet. We make them ready, try to spin the fuck out 6 cities beat. What the fuck is SOS? Them niggas ain't standing on shit. Them niggas know my TV why. We was first to get shit lit. I'm smoking on that one guy. Heard they knock him off this shit. And bitch like when we know the slide. I'm choosing first. We ain't no bitch. I call us fast. We don't crash. Smoking team like I told Sally. Smoking shit. I heard a busy when I bet. They think that dice again. Playing another bet. Like what's the name? Face shot. Face shot. Since these little niggas want some fame. Talking turning in that grave with all that hauling all over. 3 niggas dead. One for the play. The other 2 gon' fill that pole. She might come back. Look, I stabbed them. I heard they kidnapped pigs. Cross the road. Nobody knows. I heard they left the nigga bleeding. I'm from Florida with a sunshine and gun. My body eating. Ain't no peace. This shit get deep. We ain't gon' stop it. Niggas freeze. 7-6 who go through bricks. Who can't even hide inside a building. Niggas bitches only with spare shit. Is this that's chillin' on the slide? Hop out on feet. And the girl when they sleep. 2 3s and they all beat. We're tossing 40s out the kid. Got the drop on OTG from this little free that I just beat. Just got the drop now. We on beat. We bout to make some recipes. Bitch, see me, but ain't couple with your bitch. Spin the beat so many times. Ain't no one out there get me sick. Tell me what happened to it. Her look creep really a bitch. That's getting burned with that blink. I ain't coming back from this. Straight from Gucci to this booty. What the fuck is in these cities? Let's go see that shoot a movie. We gon' name it Halloween. We falling out. They hit a target. So they don't get on feet. We make them right. He try to spin the fuck by 6 cities beat.
If I could have 1 moment, Your Honor.
Judge 6, 7, 8, and 9 are on C, the record,
Say that again.
are the exhibits for C?
Your Honor, the state doesn't have any other witness to arrest.
Perry, you gonna be ready?
All right, I'd call Tyrell Phillips, his dad.
You swear from the testimony God gave us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. You can state your name and spell it for the record.
My name is Tyrell Phillips. That's T-E-R-R-E-L-L. Last name is Phillips, P-H-I-L-L-I-P-S.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips, is your son Tyrell Phillips?
He is.
Okay. And do you have any other kids?
I do. I have 2 more.
All right. Boy or girl?
I have Dylan Phillips and Myra Phillips.
All right.
And a bonus child.
Okay. And how old is Ty?
Tyrell's 22.
All right. And has he lived in this area his entire life in Hillsborough County?
Yes, he has.
How about you? How long have you lived in Hillsborough County?
I came to Hillsborough County back in 1997.
Okay. And who do you reside with now?
When you say reside, where do I live?
Yeah, where do you live with? Who do you live with?
Who do I live with? My family. I live with Tyrell, his fiance, his daughter, my wife, the other 2 kids.
Okay. Now, Daniela, that's his girlfriend?
That is.
Okay. And how long have the 2 of them been together?
They're high school sweethearts.
Okay.
Well, roughly 3 years.
All right. And do they have a child together?
They do. She's 4 months up today.
Is that Zariah?
That is the right.
And she's how old now?
She's 4 months today.
Okay. All right. And has Ty been involved in the raising of Zariah?
That's 100%.
All right. And do he and Daniela seem to have a good relationship with each other?
Great, yes.
Ever any incidents, police call, or any concerns about that in any way?
None.
Okay. Now, at the time that all this occurred, was Ty working?
Yes, he's gainfully employed with Coca-Cola. He's
And-
been there 2 years.
And he's been at Coca-Cola for 2 years?
Yes, that's
What's his
correct.
position there?
Yeah, he's a warehouse manager.
All right. And that's where? Is that the plant in Dunedin?
It is, yes, sir.
Okay.
That's correct.
So that's quite a distance from where you guys live. My understanding is that Ty would stay at the George Road address, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, and whose residence is that?
That is our residence as well.
Okay. And why would he stay there?
It's a closer commute.
Okay, so it makes the trip back and forth to work every day shorter?
That's absolutely
Okay.
correct.
But if the court agrees to allow a bond to be set, and you guys are able to make arrangements to get him released, where will Ty live?
He will be living with me
Okay.
and the rest of our family and his daughter.
All right, and you are, his mom lives here locally too,
His
correct?
mother lives in Brandon, that's correct.
All right, and her name is?
Angie Phillips.
Okay. Now, Angie and you have been divorced for how long?
Is it 13 years?
Okay. And are you remarried?
I am remarried, yes.
Okay, and your wife is?
Her name is Brooklyn Phillips.
Okay, and they're all here today, right?
They are.
Okay, and I think one of your sons is here and Danielle is here,
That's correct.
and I think a nephew.
My nephew is.
Okay. All right, and is everyone in the family supportive of Ty in regards to making sure that he's going to stay away from where he needs to stay away from, whatever the court orders him to do, and make sure he's just going back and forth to work and staying out of trouble and making his court dates?
Absolutely. My son is he's righteous and he's responsible and he's accountable and he has a tremendous amount of integrity. I don't see him not, coming to court if he was right.
Does he have any place else to go?
No.
Okay,
Besides his mother's house or our house.
okay. And that's all in Hillsborough County?
That's correct.
Has he ever lived anywhere out of the state of Florida?
No,
Did he go to high school here?
he did, yes.
All right. I want to ask you about any kind of problems with Ty when he was younger. Did he ever have any kind of a juvenile record of any kind?
He did not. He's a great kid. He's a great person.
Okay. And has he ever been arrested before?
One time, it was a reckless driving.
Was it originally he was arrested for DUI?
DUI, yeah.
And then the case was later reduced to a reckless driving?
That's correct.
Okay, and he successfully completed that case?
He did.
And so other than that reckless driving, there's been no other prior criminal charges against him in any way?
No.
Okay. I don't think I have any further questions.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So I apologize, we have to meet under these unfortunate circumstances. There are a variety of people here today. There's a woman seated here that was with you, who's that?
That's my wife.
And at the far end, there's a young woman there. Is that
That's Ty's fiance, Dan.
next to her is a young man in a black shirt?
My son, Dylan.
And this guy here in the orange
That's
shirt?
my nephew, Dante.
Dante.
That's correct.
Dante is another one of these rappers, right?
He is with TDY.
He's Retro Kid.
What he is, yes.
He just made a video a month ago or so with your son Tyrell where they're again flashing guns. Is that right?
I haven't seen the video.
You want me to play it for you? I have it on my desktop, my laptop over here. Okay, hang on. Actually, you know what? I can just fire it up on the computer. We can all watch it. I gotta get I'm just gonna get this way. Now you tell me if I'm doing anything wrong here. I'm gonna go to YouTube as soon as it wants to load. While that's loading, your son is still friends with Christian Cruz Cordova, correct?
I'm not sure. My son's been incarcerated for a month. So
You don't know that your son is talking to Christian Cruz Cordova on his jail visits and communicating with you, and Christian Cruz Cordova and the rest of his friends are putting together money to help pay for the bail and to
No.
help take care of the kid and
No.
all those things?
No.
You don't know any of those things?
I'm taking care of the bail, my wife and I.
So there's no situation where you had your first jail visit with the defendant by video with your wife and your son girlfriend, fiance, whatever she is, where you told him that tomorrow, the next day, that Christian Cruz Cordova, aka the real band up, and all the other boys were gonna have a jail visit with him?
At the first, yeah.
Yeah, so you knew that. So you
Well, I
knew
knew
he's still
I
talking
knew
to
he
you.
spoke with him.
Can we let him just
But as
answer?
far as friends, I don't know.
Oh, you don't know if he's friends with
I
him?
can't, you're saying if he's friends to this day right now, right?
Okay.
Okay.
What about TBY Rocco? He's still friends with him too, right?
He is friends with him.
And there's a guy named Vic, who I think
Vic.
goes by Back Joe.
He's a friend of his as well.
Are there any other ones, or am I forgetting? I can't keep track of
I'm
them.
not sure. You'd have to do your research on that.
He's still friends with those guys, right?
Yes, he is.
This is not the only gun he owns, right?
No, he owns one more, but the ATF has.
Okay, so your son had multiple guns, not to mention the ones that I can find him in videos that are not handguns, right? Oh, sorry, I forgot, we skipped it, let me go back here. Here's a video, you tell me, is this TBYREL? Because it looks like it's posted from the actual TBYREL account. And it looks like it's posted October 6, 2023. That's your son, right?
That's correct.
That's Christian Cordova, turn around. And that's Dante, right? That's a gun, it looks like? That looks like your son holding a gun.
They can stop my play, masked up, shell catch the hopper, how we operate. And then we flip the scene, get the fuck around, get the fuck up out the way. They try to tap it, turn the silence on, say they fuck ass on the chase. They got the game fucked up, trying to get innocent, till the niggas snuck up, till them niggas pick them up. Tell that chick,
Wait, I lost it, let me go back, sorry.
till them niggas pick them up, that's on the chase. They got the game fucked up, trying to get innocent, till the niggas.
That's Christian Cruz Cordova back there, isn't it?
Looks like.
While your son's there flashing a gun at the 1 minute mark? You really think your son's not part of this K4K TBY gang?
I don't think K4K is a gang. I think it's the title of a song.
It's the title of a song. It actually has to do with a kid named Kamari Kerr, who's the kid depicted on the t-shirt who died, who was a friend of all of theirs, who now they claim K4K, kill for Kamari, right?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know.
I do not. I know they're not a gang now.
All right, well, can you tell me, I'm going to play another video by your son here. Here's TBYREL. This is Make It Clear. I've watched this one too. This one is from 9 months ago, and I want to ask you about this gun in it that's clearly not a handgun, or at least not a traditional handgun, sorry. What's that gun? Because that sure looks to me like a MAC-10 with a silencer.
I'm not sure if it's real.
Oh, you don't know if it's
I
real?
don't know.
So your son has real guns in his videos, but this one might be fake.
I don't know. I wasn't at the scene.
Well, I'm not asking you if it's at the scene. I'm asking if your son owns this gun,
Well,
and if
I
it's a
have
real
to
gun.
to actually know that. No, he hasn't brought that gun in my house now. I do know what guns he has in my house. And I was the one who brought it to the
That's your son actually wearing the ski mask like the one he was wearing. It's not a ski mask, it's really considered called ski mask. But the mask, like the son you're wearing that night at Ybor, right? It's that same sort of pull over the head black thing, right?
That's correct.
Pass the witness round.
No, Your Honor.
Yes, Ron.
Same thing.
No further witnesses, Your Honor.
Anything else?
No, we're ready to proceed already.
All right, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't really need to belabor it all. I'm sorry? I don't want to belabor it all. You've obviously heard it. It hasn't been that long an afternoon, but the standard is the defendant has to be presently charged with a dangerous crime. Murder in the second degree definitely qualifies. There's a substantial probability the defendant committed the crime. We know that the defendant fired the shot. He admitted he's the one who fired the shot. The question is ultimately whether or not he fired in self-defense. And I want to point out clearly what the defendant's story and claim to self-defense is and has been. The defendant is identifying effectively 3 people, though one of them might be one of 2 people. There's the guy who spit. That's the guy in the red jacket. That's the decedent in this case. There's the guy who's going to throw the punch. That's the guy in the brown jacket. And then there's the other guy who's the one going for the waistband, who's either all black and white shoes or all black and green shoes. You can watch that video. It's the state's position the defendant draws that firearm and shoots specifically at guy in the red jacket and only at guy in the red jacket. We know that 2 of the shots of the 3 that are fired specifically hit him, 1 to the neck and 1 up the leg as he's already on the ground. And so the state's position and why our analysis changed at the scene is that if you think that, for example, you have Tom, Dick, and Harry, and you think Tom is the guy with the gun, you need to shoot Tom to deal with the threat. That's where the imminent threat of death is. You can't just go shooting any other person standing around. And what the defendant chose to do in this case is he chose to pick out the guy that he was specifically having the argument with, the one who's either throwing 4 fingers as a gang sign or is throwing the bird at him. But either way, you can watch the video. The defendant's attention is squarely focused on the decedent and the decedent only. He's not trying to scare away the other people. He's not trying to stop whoever this person is that he supposedly thinks has a gun. I know that we can very easily now Monday morning quarterback it and say, well, the decedent did in fact have a gun on him, and that is true. But it's clear through multiple interviews the defendant never, ever claimed the person in the red jacket, the decedent, was going for a gun. He never said he thought he had a gun. He never said he was going for his waistband. He never said that he thought he was reaching for a gun. And he certainly doesn't make any claim that he said he had a gun or was going to use a gun. The defendant shoots somebody who at that moment is not the imminent threat. He's just choosing to shoot the guy he doesn't like. And so it's our position that there's not just substantial probability, it's a certainty the defendant committed the crime. And as we can see, this defendant is opening fire in the middle of 7th Avenue at 2:45 in the morning on Halloween weekend when the street is crowded with people in all directions and choosing to discharge a gun. Now, thankfully, I guess to some degree, he only hits 1 person, but he shouldn't be hitting anyone. But either way, it's a complete disregard for the safety of the community. And there are no conditions of pretrial release sufficient to hold this defendant. So we would ask that you deny the defendant bond and hold him at no bond, given the totality of the evidence and the circumstances that have been put before you. I know that Mr. Perry went to great lengths to suggest that the victim is a gang member. I will not use the word gang member in terms of the defendant because that is a specific term under the law, but the defendant is rolling around with a group of guys who he rolls around with all the time with guns, flashing them, talking trash about another rival group, which is who we suspect the other rival group is in this instance, 6 weeks before they run into each other in the middle of the crowded streets on Halloween weekend in Ybor City. And then he's the one that chooses to pull the gun. There's no disputing that other people pull guns. There's no disputing that those people acted inappropriately and that other people got hurt, but that's not what we're here for. The question is the defendant a threat to the community? And he is. We believe he should be held at no bond. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, the 2 statutes that control, Your Honor's aware, is Florida Statute 907, and then there's also makes reference to Florida Statute 903, which is the bail statute. All right, and in order for the state to prevail in this, in asking the court to deny any citizen bond altogether and hold him on pretrial detention, they must show that the defendant is presently charged with a dangerous crime. He is. Okay, that obviously that fits. And there is a substantial probability that he committed the crime. Now that's the first place where I take issue, because the state can, and again, we're not in trial, this isn't closing arguments for the case. However, in determining whether or not the court's going to deny him his right to be able to post a bond, the state has to show, it's almost essentially that there is no defense. That's kind of the standard that's here. That's not the case here. If you watch, and Your Honors watch the videos and can watch them again, it's clear to see who the first aggressors are in this case. That you can see the boys, the men that are surrounding Mr. Wilson are the ones that make the move from across the street towards my client and the people he's with. They are continually backing up to move away as they keep moving closer and closer to them. making all sorts of gestures that my client indicates when he talks to police that he believed them to be threatening, to the point where he felt he had to use deadly force against them. And as he said, I fired at that group where they're all there, close proximity to each other. Yes, he hits Mr. Wilson in the red shirt or the red jacket, but at the same time, whether he's pointing the gun to shoot at him or at everybody, what he says is at that moment he believed that one of them was reaching for a gun. That's why he fired, and he pulls it out. You can see in the video that it looks as though there are movements towards guns, certainly even by Mr. Wilson. So to argue that there's overwhelming evidence or even substantial probability of his guilt, I think does not take into account at all the fact of justifiable use of deadly force or of his ability to stand his ground. Because as your Honor's aware, Mr. Phillips legally had that firearm. He's entitled to carry it. He even went to the lengths to get a concealed weapons permit before we passed the carry law. So even under the old law or the new law, he had the right and the ability to carry it. He's there on a public street. He's not in a bar. He's not in an establishment where he's told he can't bring that gun. He's on the street with other people that night when he is approached aggressively by these individuals, and he pulls the gun for the purpose of self-defense. Under the statute, and the state kept kind of harping on the fact that, well, he didn't actually see a gun. He didn't see someone pull a gun out. That's true. He actually agreed to talk to law enforcement, sat there, gave them a full statement, cooperated completely. It would have been real easy if he was trying to make something up to be able to say, oh no, I saw him pull a gun, because in reality, after it was all over, we know 4 of them at least had guns on them that night. They were in that group right there in front of him. We know that Mr. Wilson had one, and 3 other individuals they've now identified as firing a gun almost immediately after the first 3 shots are fired. So his fear that he had that someone was going to pull a gun and shoot at him was real, because in reality we know that's true, because they in fact did pull guns and start firing. And the jury instruction says, in deciding whether a defendant was justified in the use of deadly force, you must judge him by the circumstances by which he was surrounded at the time of the force. And it says, the danger facing the defendant need not be actual. However, to justify it, a reasonable person would have to believe that they were in fear of either what could be either deadly force or serious bodily injury to them. And if he believes that to be the case, and it's reasonable, then that's an absolute defense, and the state has to disprove that in trial. But for the purposes of this, the fact that it's legitimate to raise that there are questions in regards to those very few seconds that this whole thing occurs in. Because if you look from the time that they start to move towards him until the whole thing is over, we're talking a matter of 15 seconds when this whole thing takes place. And he's making decisions in his mind as to what he's going to do at that moment, where if he had not pulled the gun first, it's likely that he would have been shot himself. When they turn to run, his friend was standing right next to him, gets shot. 17 other people get shot that are all there that evening by all these men that have still not been arrested. So I would suggest to you that there is not a substantial probability that he committed the crime. And then the next thing for the court to consider is the safety of the community. Now, I would first suggest to you that the biggest danger of this community are these 3 men that still are out there, that didn't surrender themselves that night, hadn't come forward to law enforcement after how many weeks now, when they know that they're being looked for, who fired upon a crowd of people that night. My client fired 3 shots. He fired at a specific group that was threatening him. And as he indicated, the only reason he fired is because he felt he had to. He didn't go there with the idea, I'm going to kill somebody tonight or I'm going to shoot up a crowd. It was because of what the other individuals did to him that put him in that position to where he had to react to that. His lawful right to act that way and to use justifiable use of force. As far as conditions for him to be released on, you can put him on an ankle monitor. You can order him to stay at home. His parents all live here. His mom, his stepmom, his dad. They're all big contributing people to this community. Ty himself was working full-time at Coca-Cola right up until the evening of this happened. 2 years there, all right, working in the warehouse in Dunedin. Fully employed, has a 3-month, I guess almost 4-month-old child now. His girlfriend who's here, they're all going to be living in the same house together here in Hillsborough County. So the court can be assured that he's going to be here, stay present, be ready for court, assist me in preparing his defense in this case as we move forward through the system. And so I would suggest to you that there are reasonably sufficient conditions that the court can place on my client in order to secure the safety of the community. And frankly, the concern that I guess that all of us should have is the fact that there are these 3 men that are still out there. We don't have any control over that. I can't do anything to go get them arrested or do anything about that. However, my client, he's this one little incident within 15 seconds of time where he made a decision, and a jury will decide someday whether or not it was justified or not. And that's a decision that we can't make today, but I would suggest to you, based upon all the circumstances surrounding this, how if you look at the bail statute, almost every one of those sections are favorable to him. You determine the nature of the offense, okay? That's one that the court can take either way. The weight of the evidence against him, we've already discussed that. Family ties, length of residence in the community, employment history, financial resources, past and present conduct. His only prior contact with the law was for a DUI arrest, which resulted in reckless driving. Nothing else. Nature, again, the source of funds used to post his bail, as he indicated, his dad is the one who, and his family are the ones that are handling all the financial issues, both with me as well as if he's released in any way. And then it says whether he's already on release for another criminal case. He's not, because he hasn't been arrested for anything. Whether there's a probability of intimidation or danger to the victims, well, obviously not to Mr. Wilson, but I would suggest to you that there's more concern about intimidation to these people, to my client, that are out there, that are still out there with their guns after they shot up Ybor City that night. And whether or not there's probable cause to believe that he committed a new crime while he was on pretrial release, which of course he hasn't, because he's been in custody since this began. So based upon all the circumstances set out in Florida Statute 907 and 903, I'm asking the court to deny the state's request for pretrial detention, and I'm asking the court to set a bond. I would be asking the court to consider a bond of like $150,000. I think that's a substantial bond in the case. It would require great resources for his family to even attempt to do that, and place any other conditions the court needs to place on him in order to assure his presence in court and out of trouble and to keep the community safe. Thank you.
Judge, the unfortunate circumstance we find ourselves in is that, yes, the defendant had a lawful carry concealed permit. He was carrying a gun lawfully, and he has an absolute right to engage in self-defense when he does so lawfully. The problem is that the defendant, like so many people in the state of Florida, do not really understand what it takes to justifiably pull a trigger. And the magic word in the self-defense statute is prevent. The defendant must reasonably believe the force was necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm. And so what the defense is suggesting is that if your bailiff and I got into an argument off duty and he decided to pull a gun at me, I can go ahead and shoot your clerk or shoot your court reporter or shoot the people in the jury box or shoot the people in the audience, because that's somehow going to prevent the guy with the gun from hurting me. The second thing I would point out is that all of this is predicated on the defendant claiming that maybe, possibly, someone other than the guy he shot had a gun in his waistband and might have been reaching for it. And I think it's important for Your Honor to look at the defendant's credibility, because Mr. Perry sings his praises for coming back to the scene, but when he came back to the scene, he doesn't mention Christian Cruz Cordova, he doesn't mention Zach Cherry, he denies being involved in K4K even when he specifically asked about it, denies knowing anything about it being something about some dead kid or about this being some sort of rival gang, whatever that might mean, behavior. The defendant is not being honest. What he's doing is he's had 2.5 hours after he's talked to his father to sit in the back of a car and think about what it is he wants to say exactly. And even when he says it, he gets it wrong. Because most people walking around the state of Florida seem to think that if you just say, I was scared, that means you can start pulling the trigger. And that's not what the law says. So the defendant is guilty and will be found guilty ultimately, I believe, because he will not prevail on a self-defense claim because he's not preventing death, he's causing death. And it's not going to save anyone's life in the way that he accomplished it. The defendant is a danger. He chose to go to Ybor armed with a gun to be out a person in the community, actively stoking animosity with this potential rival group. And when they run into each other, yeah, the defendant backs up, that's true, but then he decides to pull the gun first and shoot and kill the guy who isn't even the actual danger, according to his own words. We would ask that you grant the state's motion.
I'd like to see stage 3 again.
Yes, Your Honor. I think I actually have it on the computer
Can you
already.
slow it down at some point?
I believe I can, but there's 2 videos. I can put the other one on the computer if you like that one instead.
Yeah, there's the one that shows the full scene where you can see.
I was interested in the bridge.
That's 13 days.
Just before he shoots.
Yeah, I put it here. Give me 1 second, Your Honor. Let me see if I can get it to do what you want. You want this one or the other one,
That's
Judge?
fine for now.
Okay, I'm going to start it from the beginning
I
again
get
for
it
you.
right there. Please play.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Play.
Oh, good.
Do you want to see the other one or is that it?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
These are my observations. I don't see anybody spitting in it. And when I look at that video in slow motion, his right hand is swinging past his hoodie. If he has a concealed firearm in his waistband, you're not gonna swing it past your hoodie. You're gonna lift up your shirt with your left hand and unholster your weapon with your right hand, kind of like he did when he shot you. And he never once mentioned that he was afraid of the person in the red having a gun. Specifically said somebody else did. And as Mr. Diaz pointed out, if you're going to shoot someone that you believe is going to shoot you, you shoot the one you believe has the gun, not the person that you believe spit on you, which I don't see any evidence of that either. He also said, he's a bright kid. He's not dumb. And the words he uses, I was scared, it was self-defense, I had to use my gun. If I remember correctly, are almost verbatim of what they tell you during your concealed weapons permit class. If you're ever involved in a shooting that you believe you were justified in using, you have to articulate those facts so that you can assert your right to stand your ground. So, a few hours in hindsight, he sits down in the police car and uses the exact language, the only possible way to avoid culpability in this case, if he can convince folks that he shot somebody in self-defense. He didn't target the person that he thought was a threat. He clearly took the 9mm handgun, or the 10mm handgun, with a Glock 20 magazine. It's not even a magazine made for the Glock 26 or 29. And he modified the gun. He put on the red, he was proud of that gun. He took out the magazine release and put in a custom red magazine release. He took off the slide lock slide release and put on a custom red slide release, so it's going to look good probably in these videos that these people all think they want to do. And whether whether K4K is a gang or not, it's clearly an organization that is, rallied around this person who was killed. And it could, I don't know if it meets the legal definition of a gang yet, but maybe someday it will. But then there's the neighborhood Crips the NCH or the NHCs that they diss in the video. And it appears to me that these folks, that may or may not have been from a rival group, are holding up the 4, which is basically the 4K4 sign, maybe disrespecting, because when one group of people flashes the signs of another group of people, it's considered disrespectful. You don't do that. Yet they're overtly doing that to antagonize him. He gets, I believe, he loses his temper, takes out his firearm, and shoots rounds. And why I believe is it a complete, and the word said, disregard for the safety of the community? He fired 3 rounds. No bullet was recovered from the body, and maybe just the one when we shot the person in the leg. But the first round was a pass-through, through the neck, through the spine. Who knows where that round goes as he fires it at the crowd, the backdrop of humanity. The second round he completely misses because the target, the kid is falling, shoot, hit, shoot, miss, shoot again, and hit him in the foot as he's thrown on the ground. There's no disrespect for the safety committee, as he just blindly pulls out his gun and shoots at somebody he doesn't like very much. And for those reasons, I'm going to find that there is no reasonably sufficient way to keep the community safe because of his affiliation with this group of folks who might be interested in helping raise money to get him out and to possibly retaliate against the other group of folks that they already had a beef with in Ybor City. And the safest place for him and our community is the inside of Hillsborough County Jail until such time we come to trial and let the jury figure it out. So for that, I'll grant the state's request for a pretrial release.
Do we have a future court date?
No, today was,
Future court date, Your Honor.
Disposition, I would imagine.
yes.
How far down the road would you like that?
Well, I mean, next year sometime.
We could do, late, late or late January or early February. February 1st?
Yes, that works good.
All right. Thank you. February 1st at 8:30 for disposition.
Your Honor, will the court entertain a no contact order with Christian Cruz Cordova, Bradley Toro Garcia, who's obviously a witness in this case, as well as Zachary Cherry? Those 3 gentlemen are all in Ybor with him. They are also members of that same group, I believe, and I would ask that you order him to explicitly have no contact with any of them.
I have no problem with him having no contact with anyone that's out of that scene that night.
They have no contact with any person affiliated with the group K4K
Or TBY.
or TBY, the rap video production crew. And I tell you, people make these videos on YouTube every day, and it does them no good. It's just mounted evidence every day. Thank you. Court's in recess.